Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you joining us today. We are very pleased to be offering this webinar, which is titled English Language Classes from the Community to the University, with our speaker, Ryan Sheldon from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Before I turn it over to Ryan, I'm going to go through just a few slides to offer a bit of background about a project that my colleagues and I have been working on. And would love to share with you. So who are these colleagues, right? And who am I? This is our research team. So starting from left, we have Dr. Carrie Evans, who is in the School of Social Work at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. My name is Lisa Unangst. I teach at one of the SUNY campuses, Empire State University, and we work with Dr. Isara Casillas Connors, who is based at the Policy School at Texas A&M University. And why are we here today? What have we been doing? Well, we have been working on a project for the last year and a half with Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area, which is a branch of one of the 9 federally recognized refugee resettlement agencies. In conjunction with LSS-NCA, we have been running focus groups and interviews. That was the first stage, to learn more about how the staff at Lutheran Social Services National Capital Area understand the resources, supports, and barriers to higher education for people with refugee status and other statuses like parole status that indicate a history of displacement. So we started with focus groups and these staff interviews. We then moved to develop in conjunction with LSS-NCA a community advisory board comprised of displaced learners from different national backgrounds, different ages. And that community advisory board did a number of things over the course of a year. That board put together a resource on scholarships and other types of financial aid for displaced people in Maryland and Virginia. They also decided to survey 43 program participants. Well, they surveyed program participants, and the number of respondents was 43, to learn more about how LSS-NCA clients thought about other resources that might be useful to them in accessing higher education, right? What their needs were. And then finally, we ran 2 resource mapping sessions with both staff members as well as the community advisory board, asking them about the organizations, the resources in the area that were supportive of higher education access for refugees. So we wanted to share just a few of these findings again briefly before turning it over to Ryan for the main presentation today. Well, common barriers to accessing higher education based on our focus groups and interviews included English language skills. So thinking about English language proficiency, not only in terms of sort of day-to-day proficiency, right, but thinking about what that proficiency in the context of academic learning looks like. We heard from some folks that they felt as though they were falling short in the U.S. educational system due to this issue with academic level English proficiency. Some folks were looking for more advanced English language courses, right, in different settings, in school, in a community setting to help them with that. Certainly, we heard that information access was an issue, right? So understanding which colleges and universities were available in the area, what sorts of degree and certificate programs they offered, what types of tuition were relevant for those different programs and at those different universities. And that in turn relates to another challenge. We heard pretty clearly that those tuition costs were often really out of reach for lots of folks, right, associated with LSS-NCA. And so again, we've focused in our work to some extent on scholarships and other sources of aid. Oops, sorry about that. Finally, we wanted to mention that recertification or recognition of credentials came up a number of times through these focus groups and interviews, meaning that someone who attended university elsewhere, whether they received a degree or not, they might encounter some pretty significant challenges in having that academic work recognized by a U.S. college or university, which could put them in a position to have to repeat some of the same coursework or potentially even an entire degree. So, from the survey that the Community Advisory Board ran itself, right, that survey with 43 respondents, some of the results that we wanted to highlight were as follows. 47% of survey respondents reported looking for assistance locating advanced English classes, right? So, again, looking at that question of academic proficiency. And then 65% reported hoping to have connections to alumni, staff, faculty at universities, learning more about the application process and the enrollment process, right? What that would look like from insiders. So, what are we doing now? Moving forward, we're continuing our work on this topic, and we're speaking directly with students who are between 18 and 25 years old and identify as a refugee, asylee, or migrant who has experienced displacement but perhaps has a different legal status. We're looking for folks who are enrolled in a community college or a 4-year program. We are able, through a grant received, to offer compensation for folks in this study, $35 per month. And what would you be doing? Well, you'd be responding to some text prompts. You'd be answering a few survey questions, in some cases, taking images of what life is like for you on your campus. We'd be very happy to answer any questions that you have and just wanted to provide information. You can see here both the link to the registration survey where you'd go to just indicate that you're interested in learning more. We also have the QR code if you'd like to scan that. Please feel free to share this with members of your network as you'd like. And that will begin in January. So no time like the present to fill that out. We also wanted to make you aware of links to some webinars that we've done on related topics, key features of U.S. higher education, and demystifying the college financial aid process for immigrants and refugees. You can find those free videos here. Finally, a quick note that we are recording today's session to make this available for folks who weren't able to join us synchronously. If you do have any questions, please raise your hand before unmuting or go ahead and type questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure that we have time for question and answer at the conclusion. I'd like to turn it over then to our speaker today, who again will be speaking on the topic English language classes from the community to the university. Ryan Sheldon, as I mentioned, is at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where he is at the English Language Institute and also engaged with special programs through the Center for Global Engagement. So, Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I really appreciated the opening there. It's good to have a little more context to some of your prior conversations. So if you give me a moment here, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm working off a couple monitors here. So if I break eye contact for a second, it is absolutely nothing personal. It's just making sure that I can see everything that I'm working with. So as Lisa mentioned, my name is Ryan Sheldon. I'm the director of the English Language Institute and Special Programs here at UMBC. I'm part of the Center for, or we, I should say, are part of the Center for Global Engagement, which I'll elaborate on a little bit here in just a moment, but we're essentially the international office for the university here at UMBC. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to go through some information that I reviewed with Carrie and Lisa earlier that will introduce you a little bit to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and in its own way, kind of to other institutions, four-year institutions, higher ed institutions, break down some of the services that are involved at our university and others, and then share a little bit of information about our academic English program, which obviously I think it was 47% of respondents were interested in learning more about similar types of programs, as well as reviewing a little bit about what it looks like to be an applicant or a student, or even really just in the inquiry process at a program like my own, the EOI, or a degree program at a university. So as mentioned, UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. We are, as the name literally says, just outside of the city of Baltimore, but we do have a Baltimore address. And so some quick facts about UMBC. So UMBC itself is really what many of us in the United States would consider a relatively young institution. We were established in 1966, so we haven't even hit 60 years just yet. But in that time, a whole lot has happened and a whole lot has changed. It should be noted, I'm very proud of this. I think it's something that many of us here are very proud of. UMBC was founded as an institution to provide more opportunities to diverse communities of students across different ethnic, social barriers and things like that. And we've remained one of the more diverse campuses in the country. Some of which you can see reflected here. We are roughly 14,000 students right now on campus between undergraduate and graduate. And we here at CGE are really proud to share that we have over 2,500 international students here on campus. We've seen a real explosion in international enrollment, and it's something that we're very proud of. It certainly keeps us busy, but it really adds to the community and obviously keeps our lives very interesting. I put the plus next to the 2,500 there because we have 2,500 students in student status. We'll talk a little bit more about different statuses later, but we have really probably closer to 3,500 students here on campus in different types of statuses, studying, doing OPT, which is forms of work approvals and things like that. So we really have a robust international community here, and it's not uncommon to hear me in meetings talking to individuals here on campus or elsewhere saying that UMBC is in the process of going from a regional university to a global university. And we're very proud to be a big part of that process. Like many institutions, particularly we would consider ourselves mid-sized. Those mid-sized institutions, we have a wide variety of programs. Again, I'll talk about mine here in just a few minutes, the academic English side of things. But UMBC, and this has probably changed since I made this slide, we've got over 100 majors and programs ranging from some of those listed here, the arts and social sciences and so on. But I do think it's probably safe to say, and Carrie might agree with me, that UMBC has in many ways built its reputation on being a STEM-focused institution. We have a wide variety of programs, again, but we're probably that institution in the Maryland system that has become known for science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's certainly something we're proud of. Obviously, we have some really impressive numbers of graduates and where they've gone on to in those fields. But I'm sure that can be said of all of the different areas of study. A bit about who we are and where we are, I should say, more specifically. So we were talking a little bit before the call here. Lisa, Carrie, myself, and others are not from the region originally, but it is very easy to make the argument that we are very well located in the United States, on the Eastern Seaboard, in the Mid-Atlantic. So UMBC, and there's another photo coming up here in a minute if it wasn't already obvious, we are really just on the edge of Baltimore City. You can see the skyline from campus. We're just a few minutes away from it. I put an ish next to it. I know that's not a real measurement for most people, but we're about 30 minutes to an hour away from Washington, D.C., which is obviously a huge benefit to us and to our students in terms of all the resources that a true global city brings to the area. Baltimore is no slouch. Baltimore is also a very large metropolitan area. And then we are furthermore not far away from some of the other biggest cities in the country, including Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, further up the East Coast there, as well as quite a few in just a few hours drive, realistically. But if you're not driving, we always have to make note of this, the DMV, as we call it, the District, Maryland, and Virginia. If you don't already know, this is also just full of resources for travel and transit, whether that be public transit, train systems. And we are within an hour's drive of 3 different international airports, or major airports at least, including BWI, which is about 10 minutes down the road, which is really, really convenient for students, for travel, for family members and things like that. So we do everything we can to take advantage of these resources. And I do think it's one of the big reasons that students do come to UMBC, particularly international students, but also why the state of Maryland, and Carrie and Lisa might be able to speak to this better than I can, but I've been in meetings with state representatives over the past year or two, and if I'm not mistaken, there's been something like a 2,000% increase in individuals that have been resettled into the Maryland area. It's been an absolute explosion, particularly in the Baltimore region. And so it's a big part of why we get the opportunity to continue to work with students and individuals who might be in a refugee or similar statuses here at UMBC and the ELI. Quick kind of overview of UMBC, again, about a mid-sized campus, 15,000 students or so. Our literal address is 1000 Hilltop Circle, and you can see why. We are very literally a circular campus. Whenever I have to give a tour or have visiting scholars here with us, I often describe it as being like an island. If you're on an island and you get to the water, you've gone too far, turn around. Here, if you get to the circular road on the exterior of campus, you've probably gone a little too far, turn around, because 95% of the campus is in the circle. However, we do have some satellite campuses, including in the DC region, in downtown Baltimore, properties that UMBC has oversight over, where we are able to offer classes and different opportunities either from the ELI or other programs. And if anybody is clocking it near the top of the picture here, you'll see 95, you'll see 195, and some of the other major thoroughfares that are all but just a few minutes off the edge of campus, sometimes less, depending on how fast you drive, I guess. So it is a very interesting campus, again, for a young school. We've got a lot of resources, a lot of new research facilities and things like that that really help keep us on the cutting edge. In an earlier slide, you may have noticed that we received R1 research designation, which means that we are one of the leaders in the United States amongst higher ed institutions for research and scholarly pursuits. So we're really proud of that and have a lot of really interesting resources available to those scholars and researchers. Moving on from UMBC itself, you probably have felt like you've heard enough. I'll tell you a little bit about the English Language Institute, my program, as well as the Center for Global Engagement. So, as I mentioned earlier, CGE is also a relatively young office, only a few years since we've been able to kind of combine all of our different international departments and staff on campus into one centralized location and one centralized office. CGE is the office that hosts, amongst other things, my program, the English Language Institute, ISSS, International Student and Scholar Services, which primarily focuses on immigration and immigration services, advising, those types of things. Education abroad, sending students out and bringing them in. We also have a very robust Fulbright program, which we're very proud of. I'm not supposed to say it, but we have more than Harvard, so we're pretty proud of that. And we have quite a few international partnerships that we work with, both my own office and beyond. Some of the faces here, including my own, probably a younger and thinner version of myself, but include Dr. David DiMaria. He's our SIO, or Associate Vice Provost, our Senior International Officer, who really is the driving force behind all that we do, including some of what I'll talk about here in a few minutes from the refugee perspective and working with individuals in similar statuses. And Adam Holden, as listed there as well. But we have about 30 people in our office, works with international partnerships. And so he's a driving force in making sure that we're making those connections that benefit certainly our own programming, but the students and the populations that we do want to focus on. So what is the ELI? Who is the ELI, and what do we do? So I'm going to use the term ELI throughout the rest of this, so I don't have to say English Language Institute over and over. And that's generally how most people know us. But the ELI is a traditional IEP, as one might call it, or an intensive English program. And so we've been part of UMBC since the early 90s. Like many IEPs around the United States and beyond in other countries, we really grew out of the need that was already present on campus. So as we mentioned, we've got a large number of international students. We're a mid-sized institution, and we had graduate students, undergraduate students from around the world whose first language was not English, who were in degree programs and already highly successful, but needed a little additional support with their writing, with their speaking skills, and different things like that. So UMBC decided to create this office once upon a time, again, back in the early 90s, to support what was then a small population of students, and we've since then grown at different points. Enrollment obviously ebbs and flows, but we've serviced over 200 students at any given point in time. We are below that now. Coming out of the pandemic, everybody's enrollment has taken a hit, but we continue to offer a wide variety of classes, which I'll discuss here in just a minute as well. And so our goal as an IEP and as an institute, being the ELI, is to support learners of all proficiencies in achieving their goals. And it's my understanding from that introduction, amongst other things that Lisa offered not too long ago, that most people on this call or viewing this recording are interested in academic English, but we also have individuals that come to us with professional goals, with social goals. They might have recently moved to the United States and they maybe are not actively working or studying, but they want to feel more acclimated to their environment and increase their language skills. And we work with all of them. We are very happy to welcome essentially one in all with a few, bound or barriers or not barriers, a few parameters. There we go. Around that, obviously, we have our own admissions process and so on, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we really like to have our doors be open and welcome all kinds of individuals who are really looking to pursue their goals. With that, because everybody's goals can be different, we are very excited and work very closely with our undergraduate and graduate admissions to make sure that we can offer a pathway, a path or a process for students in our program to move into the university, which is essentially the crux of what we're talking about here today. We also, the special program side of my title, we partner with organizations from around the world and in the United States to develop specialized programming that can reach the goals of groups as well. They might be professional groups, they might be academic groups and things like that, which I know is not the focus of what we're talking about today, but I'll touch on that a little bit here in a minute. So in front of us here is a visual essentially of what our program looks like in action. So there's a few different colors and titles here represented, but we work with students from what we would consider level intro, what we would call, I should say, level intro, up through level 5. And we do have a level 6 as well. Level 6 is not reflected here and isn't advertised as much because that's typically for active graduate students who might be working on very specific types of research or presentations in their fields. Those are always available, but they're very enrollment dependent. So we don't necessarily make that the focus of our presentations and marketing and things like that. So most of our students will place into then level intro through level 5. These are all aligned with the Common European Framework, CEFR. CEFR might be different terms you've heard for it. If you are not familiar with it, it is a global proficiency scale that can be used for any language and measures an individual skills within that target language across a really wide variety of areas. If you're ever interested or bored or have the time, the full document is online. It's 200 plus pages. It's an interesting read. But the keys to it are they work from level A through level C. It's an ascending scale. A1 being the lowest, that would equate to intro here, to C2 being fully fluent. And so our levels, while we use numbers, which most institutions will do, they are aligned with the Common European Framework. And so an individual may be able to come in and say, I'm a B2, and I'll say, I will know, my faculty and staff will know what that means. That translates to essentially a level 3 here in our own scales. But it also helps us in staying consistent. I certainly have stories that I've shared more than once of students that come in and they place into level 2 from our processes or placement tests. And they say, well, I was level 23 at my last institute. And I was like, great, I don't really know what that means. But with the Common European Framework, we have a nice standard scale there. For levels intro through level 3, you'll see that kind of bluish teal color there, the intensive English program. For most of our students, but not all, if they are in a student status, they'll be studying full time, and refugee statuses and others we'll talk about in a minute and how that can translate to study time and so on. They'll be studying 20 hours a week. It's their job essentially in terms of their academic focus and their studies in English. We are a Monday through Friday program. We are a business hours program. So our earliest classes start about 8 a.m. Our latest will go to about 5 p.m. I should say. Sorry, not 5 a.m., 5 p.m. at the latest. And then as students progress through our levels, levels intro through 3, I like to consider more the foundational levels of language, the beginner and intermediate levels, where we're working with students to build out a robust structure within their language skills, their English language skills. So we focus on all 4 major areas of language: speaking, listening, reading, and writing, as well as grammar and vocabulary, and so on. And then once students get to level 4 or 5, we have a bit of a split there depending on their interests. So most of our students will go into that kind of burnt orange area, the academic English program, which, as it's listed up here, is exactly what it sounds like. It's where the language of focus and the language instruction then shifts more towards academic university styles of rhetoric and so on in the English language instruction. So this is where you'll have students working on different types of rhetorical styles of writing, working on research, working on scholarly presentations and things like that. And that's because most of the students that move into our program or study with us they do come with that goal that, again, Lisa alluded to earlier of moving into the university, whether it be our own or a different one. I tell people all the time, I'm not in sales. I want people to reach their goals. If UMBC is the right fit, that's wonderful. If it's not, there are so many institutions out there, including in this region, that might offer the right program and the right fit, maybe the right funding for those individuals. So, but we do like to make sure that we're preparing them to be successful at 2-year, 4-year graduate programs, things like that. So this is more or less what we see here internally. There are some boxes there to the side that denote usually when students are in level 4 or 5, they might be starting to apply for university programs and things like that. They can do that simultaneously while they study. There are a lot of different paths into university admission, which I'll talk about in another slide or two here. But we are just one of those ways that a student can make their way into a university program, degree program, things like that. So this is essentially recapping what I just shared there. So I won't spend much time on that. But again, we have our IEP and our AEP programs, as we call them. Everything here is intensive. That's really kind of our focus. But certainly students might study part-time with us and have fewer than those 20 hours that are averaged by many of our students and things like that. But that's part of the fun, too. We get to work with individuals and do advising with each of them and work through their goals, their schedules, their different responsibilities on and off campus to make sure that we're trying to build a schedule that works for them and their goals. As I mentioned earlier, and again, I'll only touch on this a little bit, but special programs, we've got some great images here of a program that we run every summer that focuses on young leaders from sub-Saharan Africa. But the special programs office is a big part of what we do here as well. And it's kind of what it sounds like. We work with individuals, we work with partner institutions, we work with companies, we work with really anybody that's interested in sitting down and talking about how to put together a program that can be, as noted there, anywhere from a week to a month or longer. We've had programs that run for years. We've had programs that run for 10 days. And what we do is we build out personalized content, personalized trainings. They can be academic, they can be professional development, any number of different things to fit those needs and those requests. And, going back to that map earlier on, we also get to toss in some fun stuff like visits to DC and Annapolis and things like that. In fact, this image here is at the State House in Annapolis, meeting with the governor. Amongst other things, we've made trips to the White House and all kinds of other interesting places. And so it's a really fun and unique part of what we do. And other IEPs do this as well. But, in the event that, I don't know, maybe somebody does have an idea or a plan for something that's a little more abridged than the full semester study, it is something that's really nice to be able to offer. And again, keeps our day-to-day very interesting. So questions that come up all the time, where are students from? So our students can be from, again, really anywhere in the world, as long as they meet our admissions requirements, which again can vary depending on the program. Right now, this is a snapshot of some of the countries that our students studying at the ELI right now are from. You'll see Central and South America, you'll see Africa, really every continent apart from Antarctica. I haven't gotten anybody from Antarctica yet. That will come and study with us. And we do have a few individuals with us right now that are in refugee or similar statuses. And I won't talk about them specifically. Obviously, they deserve their privacy, but in terms of how we can work with those students and support those students is obviously a big part of what we're here to discuss today. So admissions, and this is something as questions come up, please feel free to ask. This is where things get very nuanced, right? And so there's a number of different ways that a student in any status or just about any status, there are some statuses that are not for study, and so they won't necessarily come to us because they have a professional focus or things like that. But there's a number of different ways that an individual can get enrolled at the ELI or at UMBC and then be on that path into university admission still. So I'll try and touch on each of these at least a little bit. Again, if there's other questions, I'm happy to elaborate on them. And there's a lot of information on the ELI website, on the UMBC website. Each of these have their own websites full of information. So I would encourage you to please go and do some of your own research as well to learn a little bit more in your own time as well. But One of the first ways that students, and probably the most obvious, come to us is through an ELI application. We have an online application. It's on our website. All the fields that you need to fill out are listed there. We have our application fee that can be paid right online. It's $150 right now, which is pretty consistent across academic programs here at UMBC. And this is how most students will come to us. They'll fill out an application full-time or part-time, and then we'll work with them. We'll go through placement testing, and we'll make sure that we have a schedule built for them so that they are in the best possible classes to learn and succeed. Never want someone to be too high or too low, depending on their language skills. And then we also use that as our springboard to start talking about their future goals, to be able to plan with them to move into future programs or professional opportunities and things like that. Yours truly is one of those advisors, so I do enjoy that process of being able to sit down and get to learn a little bit more about what people are striving for and aiming for as they start or continue their studies. Another option for applying and getting into UMBC as well as the ELI, and I use that very intentionally, is what is called the bridge application. So this is a singular application, can also be completed online, where a applicant applies simultaneously to the ELI and to undergraduate admission at the university. So what this does is, in one piece of paper, virtual, but in one piece of paper rather than multiple forms and so on, we review it here at the ELI as well as undergrad admissions. And what it essentially does is it grants both forms of admissions, with the qualifying factor being once a student completes their language studies at the ELI, goes through that level 5 that we talked about earlier, with the requisite scores, which for undergrad admission, they require A's and B's in their highest level classes. Once they get those A's and B's, they then have full admission into the university. So it's a pretty simple process, being internal here at our own campus, where I essentially send template letters of recommendations to a colleague of mine at undergraduate admissions, and I say, Lisa did a wonderful job. She's got A's and B's in all of these classes. The final grades have been posted, and we recommend them to move on to the degree program undergrad here at UMBC. So it's a smooth process. It means that when a student finishes, I have that asterisk there at the bottom, testing requirements can vary. When a student finishes with us here at the ELI and is planning to go to UMBC, unfortunately, this is only true at UMBC right now. We're working to try and find other universities that work with us on this. When they finish that level 5 class with A and B, they don't need to take another TOEFL or IELTS or Duolingo test or anything like that. Our grades are good enough for undergraduate admissions to understand that they're prepared for the next level. Then there's the common application, which is by name the most common application out there right now. It's probably used at all of our institutions in one form or another. It is an online application, which I have to be honest, I'm not in love with. It is a little quirky. It is not always user-friendly. But it is what most institutions are using right now for admissions. And so with this, a student can apply. It's basically a direct application to UMBC, particularly for the undergraduate admissions office. And as they fill out their application, it will require things like testing information to report a TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, Michigan. Again, there's a wide variety of tests that are accepted here at UMBC and just about every institution in the United States. And based on that application, undergraduate admissions can determine if they are ready for full-time study as an undergraduate, or if they might need some language support. And with that, they can then offer a few different types of admission. One might be just a full-on recommendation to study full-time at the ELI before moving into the university. Or the next thing listed there is a pathway admission, where undergraduate will make the recommendation that with this type of a acceptance, they can take the majority of their classes at the ELI with 1 or 2 undergraduate classes simultaneously. And this is a unique type of admission that hopefully is giving them the best of both worlds. There's not a specific application for pathway admission. It is, again, once you've submitted that common application, we just look at it critically and determine which category might fit that student best. And so it's an individual process. We look at each application on a individual basis to try and make the best possible decision and recommendation to anybody who may have applied. And then there's conditional admission, and I know there's so many terms, it gets confusing, and I have to slow down every now and then to make sure that I'm speaking to the right thing. But conditional admission is specifically for our graduate programs. Most of our graduate programs do use conditional admission. Again, back to those asterisks there, testing requirements can vary. Our graduate programs do have the right to set different testing standards. So they might have a higher TOEFL score or lower TOEFL score, IELTS, so on and so forth, than other programs. With conditional admission, that is once someone has applied to a graduate program, they are then, again, in that review process, they may be recommended to come and study with us with the similar condition of that bridge application of once you complete your studies at the ELI with the requisite scores, you then will have full admission into your graduate program. So I wish I could say that there was one size that fits all. And I think this is going to be true for just about any institution. I've worked at a few others, Lisa, Carey, and others certainly probably have as well. But there is a lot of commonality. And for those of us that do work with admissions, whether it be for language training, undergraduate or graduate, apart from maybe getting confused by the terminology now and then and having to make sure that we're speaking the same language in that sense, we do understand where they all kind of interplay together, and then are very happy to try and offer the best possible advice that we can to an applicant or an inquirer as they come to meet with us and learn more about the programs that we offer. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, and this is a really important part of the discussion. So we're here specifically talking about refugee and similar statuses. And even when on maybe my second slide, talking about the number of students, international students here on campus, and international can be a nuanced term as well, right? We work with a wide variety of different types of visa statuses. The majority, that 2,500 that we have here at UMBC of international students, the majority of those are going to be F1 students, which is specifically a student visa. Their job is to study full-time by the requirements of that visa. And then they may move on to a different academic program or work opportunities and things like that in the United States. But we work with J visas. We interact with B visa holders, which are generally tourist visas. And then again, there's residents, permanent residents. There might be undocumented individuals, parolees, asylum statuses, things like that. So what does this mean for an applicant or for an interested student? So we as an institution have to follow all the rules and regulations for different immigration statuses. And we also have to be respectful of where an individual might be in their status journey. Many people will change statuses over time. This is very common. And in many instances is really the right idea to or individuals as they spend their time here in the United States. So and this can seem counterintuitive sometimes, but I think it is really in the best interests of the applicant or the inquirer to be transparent about their status. No one at an institution at a university is going to be judging your status, is going to be thinking of reporting a status or anything like that. It's our job to just try and offer you the best possible options for your status. And so for many of these statuses like refugee, asylees, and things like that, there is an incredible amount of flexibility within that status. There's not really limitations on the number of hours of study or things like that. You can work and study, so on and so forth. And the more that we know about the status you're currently in and that you're comfortable sharing, the more that we can advise and be accurate in some of the information that we share in terms of your options and how to pursue further study. Many individuals have come to us, particularly in refugee or asylee or parolee status. Their education has been interrupted. They started a degree in their home country or a different country, and they would like to continue that study. And we really want to make sure that we're sharing the most accurate information. And so by knowing as much as possible, we can then best advise as well as advocate. I know that we had, or Lisa had mentioned earlier, discussions about credentials and things like that. That's something that I, as an individual, have no control over in terms of my role on campus. But we understand that many individuals might have come to the United States with limited to no credentials or documentation. And it can be very complicated or confusing for an individual who's looking to further their education and find out their resources, to then be bombarded by questions online or in an application saying, upload this document, share this document, and realize that they don't actually have access to those things at that point in time. We understand that, and the university or others can still work with those individuals. You just have to have that level of comfort or confidence to be able to share that information so that we can then troubleshoot and work through that. And so, again, I won't go line by line here with the different statuses because it can be really nuanced, and I won't pretend to know all of the factors involved in this. Immigration regulation changes every single day. The regulation guidebook is enormous and has a lot of room for nuance in case-by-case situations. But I have always found that when working with individuals with different types of statuses, it is the goal of the institution to be as respectful, to be as transparent as possible. And so if individuals are able to approach it from that same perspective, it often helps both parties as they move forward and try and support each other. So some of the ways that we support individuals with refugee or similar statuses are here. And I see a hand there. I'm actually very near done with some of the prepared slides. So if we can hold on for a second, I'm happy to answer questions once we get to the end here. So, and I'm not surprised to have questions about statuses and things like that. Those always come up. So ways that we work with individuals in different types of statuses and refugee status is one, we work very closely with external organizations, some of which I'll list off here in a few minutes, but many of the students that come to us or inquiries that come to us come through nonprofits, come through community organizations, come through faith-based organizations that have been connected with individuals that have recently come to the United States, recently come to the Maryland area, and they're just inquiring. They want to learn more about the resources and the options available to them, and we are always happy to meet with them, to have continued conversations. I feel like I'm on their short list sometimes. I get lots of phone calls depending on the time of year and things like that. And it's fun. It's really enjoyable. We offer free advising, free testing. If an individual is curious about where they might stand right now in their language proficiency, we can do placement testing. That's no problem. We see that pretty frequently. I have sat around very popular or full tables with individuals from our office, from immigration, from undergraduate or graduate admissions, with the students, the external organizations, all talking, having open conversations, again, trying to find the best possible scenarios and options for students, inquirers, so on and so forth. We, as I said, we'll talk through the different forms of admission. We will talk about creative scheduling. We understand that individuals might be working, they might have other family obligations that, or things that might really affect their schedule and how best to work with that. And we will talk through funding opportunities. I have one more slide here that talks about funding. Unfortunately, funding can, as Lisa mentioned earlier, can be a really complicated topic. But we try and be as transparent as possible and discuss ways that we can offer support to students, because full transparency, higher education is very expensive in the United States, and it is for domestic or international students. And so we do understand that things can be cost prohibitive, and we certainly don't want that wherever possible. And so ways that we do offer these supports, UMBC is in the process, as I mentioned earlier, of rapidly internationalizing our campus. We work internally. As a state institution, it can be really difficult to mobilize funding, to create scholarships and things like that. But we have definitely worked internally to try and, back up what we say in terms of voicing support of individuals, to try and find ways to mobilize funding. I think we've been able to open about 3 scholarships for individuals in refugee status, most specifically lately from Afghanistan and the Ukraine. But obviously, it doesn't need to just be from those 2 areas of the world. All of our students have the same rights and privileges as anyone else, regardless of where they come from. So in the sense of academic advising and student services, the entire campus is open to anybody who enrolls at the ELI or in a degree program here at UMBC. That support is ubiquitous. It goes to anybody and everybody. And what we continue to do is advocate at that state level. And so this is something my boss, Dr. David DiMaria, who showed up on an earlier slide, is very active in Annapolis and the DC region here in advocating for all students, not just those on student visas and so on, for opportunities, for funding, and he's really been able to gain some solid ground. There's more to be done, but it's a great thing. The other I have listed there, the MIEC, which is the Maryland International Education Consortium. This is an organization of, I think it's over 20 institutions now in the state of Maryland, 2-year and 4-year institutions, public and private, that all work together for internationalization initiatives, international students. It's a great resource for anyone to look up the institutions in the state of Maryland, their types of programs, including other language institutes. I think we're the best, but we certainly have other options. And so, again, I'm not in sales. I want to make sure people are finding the right fit for themselves. And that might be a program, that might be funding, that might be location and transportation, all of those different things. And this kind of plays into how we're continuing to push forward. We're raising awareness wherever we can. We want to become a destination for individuals of all statuses. Again, Maryland has seen an explosion in the number of individuals who have been coming to the state in refugee and similar statuses. And so we want to make the pathway as smooth as possible for anyone and everyone. We understand that there are still some hurdles and challenges, and we want to make sure that we can smooth those out wherever possible. So there's always work to be done. But it is something that we're very cognizant of and that we are passionate about, that we do really care about. And I'll leave this slide up here. I do know that there were some questions, some raised hands, but some of the resources on and off campus that we work with, the Shriver Center, the Division of Professional Studies, CGE, obviously, Retriever Essentials, which works for individuals that are experiencing food scarcity, Erica in Baltimore, faith-based institutions, the Featherstone Foundation, so on and so forth. So maybe for the sake of the discussion, I will drop down the slides. I know there's at least one hand raised and maybe a few others, but I'm happy to try and answer questions as best as I can.
Yes, thank you, Ryan.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. My question, I have two questions. One about the status. I can see the whole list. So from that list, what I'm understanding is UMBC is open to accepting people with parole status.
Absolutely.
And the TPS status. And a lot of Afghans, people who came to evacuation.
Sure.
Many of whom who are interested, and they show up in our offices and they want to be connected with higher education. This is one of their questions. Am I eligible as a parole to pursue my higher education? That is great to know. You spoke of also of some scholarships available for Afghans and Ukrainians. Can you share some details about the scholarships available? Are they close already?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I can share a little bit. And what I mean by that is these are scholarships that have been made available through mobilizing internal funding. They're not ones that are openly advertised. Obviously, I can talk about it. I'm not trying to keep secrets. But we have annually 2 to 3 available full scholarships. So tuition, room and board, things like that, depending on how they might have their housing arranged and things like that, for individuals who are in refugee, asylee, so on and so forth types of statuses. And they are, I know for a fact, they're currently occupied. I think 2 Afghan students, 1 Ukrainian at the moment. But as I say, that was part of the push to back up what we were saying and trying to provide more opportunity for individuals with funding. Backtracking to my note earlier of not being in sales, the MIEC network, the Maryland International Education Consortium, I know of multiple institutions within that network as well, state and public or private institutions that have been working on similar things, have been able to offer scholarships, partial or full, to different individuals, most specifically from Afghanistan and Ukraine recently. But they are for 4 years. Yes, great question. Sorry, I just saw that pop up. And in fact, I know of a few students that were studying with us at the ELI that moved to Goucher and other institutions because as private schools, they were able to mobilize funding for them a little bit faster than the state schools were. So again, it's something that the institutions in the area are very mindful of. It just things move glacially sometimes at institutions. And so we'd like to open up more funding here at UMBC, and I know other institutions would like to as well. It just moves a little more slowly than we'd like sometimes. Great question.
Yes,
Any
that's
other
helpful.
questions?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So sometimes people, because I work with LSSMCA, it's a resettlement agency, with partnership with Carrie and Lisa also on this call. So sometimes our refugee clients show up and they ask for support, and they, they want to be connected with higher education institutions. Sure. I know every program has their own specific eligibility criteria. Or I would say the prerequisite that the person need to meet before to be enrolled in that specific program. Sure. But generally, are there general criteria for everyone enrolled in any program? Sure. And what is that?
Sure. So again, I apologize that a few things will have to have an asterisk here because everyone views things a little bit differently. But generally speaking, so for example, I'll start with my types of programs, language training programs. Admission is usually based upon eligibility, right? If they're in a status that they're eligible for. And again, that's 95% of the statuses, things like B visas that are tourist visas, there's more restrictions around. But if they're in eligible status, if they're able to pay their bills, that can be any number of different ways. It could be through a sponsorship, could be from personal funding, things like that. But those questions are asked. And then typically, if they have the equivalent of high school education in the background, that is not required. We understand that people have a variety of different exposures to education in their home countries or in their own experiences, but that's often what we see of somebody who is able to come in with some sort of academic experience in their background, and hopefully then, able to pretty quickly hit the ground running once they hit our programs. For undergraduate and graduate, I'll speak to at least the UMBC admissions requirements, and they tend to be pretty similar to other institutions. So similar things, any sort of credentials they're able to offer. But as I mentioned, we understand some individuals may have no credentials or don't have access to those credentials right now, depending on their situation. So if they're able to share that, that's wonderful. But otherwise, they will be looking for, again, any sort of history of academic training so that they can tell if they need a graduate versus undergraduate degree, right? And then there will usually be some level of testing, language testing requirements. So at UMBC, the TOEFL score is an 80, the IELTS is a 6.5. Excuse me, the Duolingo is I think it's 115 now, and things like that. And so those are kind of the baseline requirements. And then we start to get into the financial discussion. So if somebody is applying for an F1 visa, which would not be most of these individuals, if somebody is applying for an F1 visa, there are financial requirements that the federal government asks to show that an individual is able to pay their tuition fees. But because individuals can come in different statuses, that's where then we can get financial aid involved, maybe some of these other scholarships involved and things like that. So that's where I say backtracking. I don't love the common application because it just asks those same route questions every time, but everybody's story is a little bit different. The example I give with my students all the time is a large number of people may not have social security numbers, but they don't need one. But you go to whatever office and they'll say, what's your name, your address, your social security number. And when you say you don't have one, they might look at you like you have, 4 eyes or something. And it's just, they're used to asking those questions, right? That's kind of how the common application functions. And so, again, they vary. I know, for example, I think we have slightly higher testing scores than Towson does. Like if we're an 80, they're a 75 or something like that. Different schools might have slightly different requirements. But in general, most institutions are looking for more or less the same things. And they will always be very transparent about what those things are on their websites, the admissions web page and things like that. So if it's not clear there, ask, obviously, but they should be in the business of making everything transparent and easy to access.
Thank you, Ryan. That's helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, everyone. This is Mohammed. I have one question. Is the scholarship is only for the Maryland resident, or anyone can apply from Virginia or any other state? And do you have a PhD scholarship available for these two nations like Ukraine and Afghanistan?
Great question. So one, UMBC is a Maryland institution, and so it's obviously in our name. And so we often, the majority of our student population is from the state of Maryland, but anyone can apply regardless of where they live or where they come from. I got my graduate degree at UMBC as an example, and I'm from New York State originally. And I had been living in other countries for a while. So there's no limitations on where an applicant comes from. As I said, for some of these scholarships, we do not particularly have them advertised because we work with individuals on a case-by-case basis. And so we just be aware that there is funding that can be made available or may be available depending on the cycle and where students are in their 4 years of study and things like that. But they're not things that we necessarily publicly advertise. We do have a financial aid office on campus. There are merit-based scholarships for individuals who may have been high performing in their prior academics and things like that. Those are very transparent, but the funding that's been made available for individuals that have been displaced, that's more of an internal case-by-case basis to try and provide more opportunity where we can.
Thank you. Just one more question.
Sure.
Since last 2 years, I'm trying to find a scholarship for the PhD. I've done my MBA from Kabul University, and I'm struggling. I don't know how to take steps. I mean, to apply for those kinds of scholarship. So, can you guide us how to apply for this scholarship, or is there any online link, or we should visit the campus? Like, any idea about that?
Sure. So again, for certain, and this is a very complex type of topic that I'm sure Carrie and others can speak to. So scholarships are not one size fits all. And so merit scholarships are a very good example where when someone applies, if they have shown a strong background professionally or academically, an institution or a program might be willing to offer them a certain percentage off of their tuition or certain money towards their tuition. And so those can be internal. There are external scholarships, which I will be very careful to not say too much about because it's very much up to those external agencies. Those can be through banks, those can be through nonprofits, those can be through sponsors. There's all kinds of different ways for that to happen. And that's a unique process that might be a combination of research as well as being fortunate enough to be connected with the right people that might know who to contact and things like that. I personally don't have those contacts as a university representative, but they are out there. Again, those internal funding opportunities, those are on a case-by-case basis. So there's no way to specifically apply for them. They might be offered once an individual has applied. The thing that particularly for graduate study that I recommend very, very highly, I know I was able to benefit from this, and I know many other individuals, domestic and international students, are able to benefit from this, is to look for and pursue graduate assistantship opportunities. So UMBC has a large network of these. Many institutions do. So graduate assistant would be somebody who is studying as a graduate student and then works usually part-time, 20 hours on average per week at an office on campus and with a GA role for offices that are able to offer it, because it is a pretty large expense when all is said and done. They will typically pay for their tuition. They'll have a payment, like a stipend, a paycheck, and then there is also the option or the opportunity for the department to pay for their health insurance as well. So for individuals who are able to locate those, and those can be a variety of types of positions. Those could be administrative, working in an office, supporting programming. Those could be TA positions, teaching, things like that, labs and so on. For individuals that are able to locate those are absolutely life-changing for a lot of graduate students. They really help them keep their costs down, avoid loan situations and things like that, and are oftentimes really nice professional springboards as well, because you're making connections professionally while you're doing it as well. So graduate assistantships are another way to really look into funding opportunities. And so that's usually through less formal tracks, maybe as you're getting to know your program, talking with program directors, inquiring about what they might have open or other programs might have open, departments might have open. They're very seldom posted online in job portals so much as word of mouth of, I know Carrie's department has an opening, and I don't think they do. I don't know for sure, but I've heard we don't have something, but Carrie's department might. You should go over and talk to them. And so one of those reasons that I really advocate for students, particularly international students, because they may not necessarily be as practiced with it, to make themselves known to departments, to visit the department and speak with the program director or the admin assistants and things like that, so that you're a face as well as a name and an application, to really build that relationship and that rapport, because that might be that first step where they may not have a scholarship available, but they can refer you to somebody who might be able to help with funding. It can go a very long way.
If I can just echo that for PhD programs in particular, I think that's exactly the way to do it, right? Occasionally a PhD program is fully funded and it will say that online, and they only take 3 people a year, right? And they're all funded. But generally speaking, most PhD programs, people do receive some financial support, but it's through these assistantships, right? So it's contacting the department and asking the questions and doing the interviews almost before you apply. That's just kind of how PhD programs tend to work. They're a little bit different than an undergrad institution.
Yeah. And to be totally transparent, and I apologize for more personal stories, but when I was looking into graduate programs myself, really one of the major reasons that I chose UMBC amongst other options was in meeting with the program director of the program I had applied to. I was looking at paying out-of-state tuition and things like that, and not everybody is this forthcoming, but he kind of gave me a wink and a smile and said, maybe not day one, but we've got a pretty good track record with helping people find GA roles. And I did. By the second semester, I had one. And again, it really changed a lot of things for me personally. And I know that's been the case for quite a few different individuals.
I think one other question that I would like to ask on behalf of people that might watch the recording is if you can speak a little bit to so English classes are often free in the community, right? People can go to the local church, the local nonprofit, Lutheran Social Service offers them on site, right? So that's typically where people start. So, and I think you alluded to this a little in your presentation, but if you can just more directly answer, why should someone pay? What would be the benefit, right? Why should they even be considering this as an option?
That's a fantastic question, and something that, for better or worse, I get asked quite frequently. And so I do very much understand. So as you mentioned there, for most individuals that end up coming to the United States, in the state of Maryland, at least I'll use as an example, there's about a calendar year where, unless something has changed, where they have access to free tuition to language programs in the state of Maryland. And they are typically at, and I actually know the 3 institutions, but I'll just be a little general, typically at 2-year institutions in the area. And what often happens there is, and they're wonderful programs, they really are. But individuals might have these really just complex lives, right? In terms of their work obligations, family obligations, travel limitations, things like that. And they might end up in a situation where, while those classes are free, they kind of become a drop-in scenario where they go when they can, and they kind of have on and off language training. And this is no fault of their own. This is no fault of the institutions they're attending. But I've been told by many individuals, whether they be the students or those working with them, that it's just not working for them. They don't feel like they're learning at the pace they would like to. They don't feel like they're getting the type of input and output that they would like, or that they were hoping for, particularly if they fall into that category where maybe they've already begun a degree in their home country or elsewhere in the world, their education was interrupted, and they know what they're shooting for. They're looking for that 4-year degree, that graduate degree, and instead they're studying once or twice a week in community classes, drop-in, and so on. And so it just may not be fitting their goals. And so one of the things that we're really pushing for with the state of Maryland is we ourselves are a public institution, and their language is that individuals who are offered this free tuition for that calendar year are going to public schools. We're a public school. We're a state school. We want to be on that list. I would love nothing more than to be able to offer free tuition to people who are looking to continue their education, who may be in one of these statuses that we're discussing. But when it comes to making that payment, why pay for a class? Why do something different than those free classes? I think the argument that I would make is it is maybe more of a commitment sometimes, right? That expectation is that students are attending and getting the most out of their experience. I can't force people to attend, obviously. I'm not the police or anything like that. I wouldn't want to anyway. Live your lives sort of thing. But insofar as we have an academic focus from day one for people that are looking to continue their studies in higher ed, that's the language that we're doing our instruction in. That's what we're focused on. And so that's not only what they'll see reflected on the syllabus, but we are an academic institution ourselves. Students that come to us that study at the ELI, they have all the rights and privileges of a graduate student or undergraduate student. They have the same access to all of the resources. They can go visit those departments and programs that we talked about before. If they know they're going to need a graduate assistantship down the line, they can go do those things in person here while they're already on campus. And furthermore, money is money. I never want to make assumptions about where people stand financially in their lives, but our tuition is substantially lower than degree programs on campus. And so if somebody is maybe building a part-time schedule or something like that, they're getting that same quality of instruction for far less than they might be paying when they're looking at entering those degree programs as well. And we do everything we can to try and offer the best possible rate, whether that be our standard rate, or building a schedule that might have different course fees that fits their financial needs as well. And I've heard from quite a few people, again, students or organizations that have said, we understand it's going to cost us more than going to those free courses, but we see the track record and we see that path, and that's what we're willing to commit to. And so nothing is more humbling to me than when people can look at it and say that's the right choice for them, because I understand they have options and I understand that there's a lot of considerations that they're working with. But I do stand by the quality of what we do offer here and the resources that can come with that as well, that may be different in some of those other institutions or options that are available.
And I guess just to put names to some of those things that I'm thinking of as you're talking are like access to the library, right? The books, yep. Online resources, access to like our gym, our facilities, mm-hmm. right? For activity, for recreation, probably access to like retriever essentials like you talked about, absolutely. The food pantry on campus, the mental health center on campus, mm-hmm. right? Like all of those other resources that can kind of come, right? We have the I3B, the Center for Spirituality, mm-hmm. and other centers like that, right? So finding ways to get engaged. I think that all of that comes as being a student, right? Absolutely. Getting to know the faculty, all of those things that can open up doors down the line.
Absolutely. The student organizations, again, the ability to visit undergraduate admissions, to visit a department head, to sit in on guest lectures and all of those different things. Those are all part of, for ourselves, we don't have additional student fees. They're just all part of our tuition. And once you get that ID card, which comes with enrolling with us, all of those things are open to all students. So it's a real opportunity. All right. Well, I'm going to say thank you to everybody here. I do unfortunately have to hop onto another call, but this has been really fun, really enjoyable. Carrie and Lisa certainly have my contact information. Our website as well, ELI at UMBC or eli.umbc.edu has my contact information as well. And again, this is something I'm really passionate about. I really love working with students who are just trying to find the best path forward. So if you have future questions or know individuals that might want to come by and chat and learn a little bit more about us in person, please feel free to do so. And I look forward to hopefully hearing from more of you soon.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time. And just a quick note, if you would like a copy of this recording today or tomorrow, please feel free to email. I've just put my email in the chat and I'd be happy to send you this recording. It will eventually be online, but if you'd like it sooner, feel free to send that message. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan, for the
Thank you,
presentation.
everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you,
for
Ryan.
the
Take care.
comments. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.